My name is Cynthia Lieberman. I'm a content marketing and social media strategist. I have a lot of experience in the entertainment business, as do just about everybody here on our esteemed panel. What I'd like to do is start with a really quick question for you guys. This is the advertising, the official name is the Advertising VR and AR as a Branding and Advertising Strategy. And there's been a lot of talk at this whole conference and just in general about how augmented reality is moving forward much quicker than even anticipated, even since last May. So everyone who has, is there anyone who has used Google Maps? Raise your hand. There was only one person who did not raise their hand. Google Maps is augmented reality. We've been using it. It's been part of our reality. People don't realize it, just like with Pokemon Go, which kind of introduced it. We don't realize that augmented reality is already here, and there's some really great information I think you'll get out of this panel from some of our panelists about how that's going to open the door for VR and how it's going to continue to change our world in the virtual space. Really quickly, I'm going to show you, we'll go down the line, I'll tell you about our panelists, show you a video, and then we'll get the party started. But we have here, this is John Simon. John Simon's from Eisenberg, AKA Space Camp. And he has a tremendous experience we'll go through as we get down when I go to each of them. And Tom Flanagan is from Big Block, LA, and right off the plane from Denver doing an event. And then next to him is Julie Schumacher from Unity Technologies, and she's formerly of Zynga and is a very big player in this space. And next is Danilo Moura, and he just came off a plane from Brazil yesterday. He has a very interesting project to tell you that he did with that. And next to that is the lovely Christine Lee, who is going to discuss the whole performance metrics and advertising piece of the space, followed by Guy Bindoff from Sidekick VR, which will be talking about promotions and also user-generated and what's next. But before we get the party started, if you look at this graphic, and I just want to show you, this was just released, this was just yesterday at Oculus Rift. Hold on a minute. One second. This was just released yesterday at the Oculus Rift conference, and I think it'll give you a nice taste for what is happening in the space of Pretty cool. This shows you that this industry is not going to go away. This is an industry that's growing. There's a lot of investment put into this type of thing. And John Simon, he was on a panel that we did last May also about this, and he cut his teeth actually at Sony almost 2 decades ago when they were the first studio to break the $1 billion mark in this space. And since then, he's been integrating marketing efforts at different agencies and brands, Amazon, Chrysler, Cirque du Soleil, Oculus, of course, and Sony and Microsoft, among others. And now he's leading the growth at the agency, and I'll let him explain a little bit more about that. So go for it.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. Yeah, it was really exciting to work on that piece, and I know, getting to work with Oculus on that, the team at Space Camp, I think really got to immerse ourselves into the world of VR and understand it at such a deeper level. As integrated marketers, I think we're always looking at more the why we're getting involved in a specific technology or platform in order to communicate our story out there to the industry or the market and the masses. And I think as we think about VR and AR and what's really going to be helpful for anybody who's either practicing in the space or curious about entering the space and whether or not it's the right platform for them to utilize, I think that question of why is really important. Then I think once you establish that, I think it's also understanding the situation in the market, because we've all been hearing about VR for years, but everybody wonders, when are we actually going to have it in our homes, and when are our friends and family all going to have it, and when is it really going to become more established, a part of our lives? Because we've all heard the very PR-worthy aspects of it that are there. Then knowing that situation, then you think about what you're trying to do and the story you have to tell. It's very important to know who you're telling it to, and whether or not those that are going to be more susceptible to utilizing VR or even have VR or AR accessible to them, is that really the right approach for you? And then lastly, how to do it, how to enter. And I think we got a great group of panelists here that are actually practicing in the space, creating stories for it, or helping to amplify the stories through this platform in a way that you can really reach some people who are going to be really passionate about it. So thinking back to the why VR, AR, I always like to, or I often have people come to me and say, they're all kind of in the same bucket. And I think we discussed this on our last panel, is that VR and AR are actually very different platforms, where VR, as you saw within the video, people are truly immersed in another world. They're transported and taken somewhere else. And I think that's something very important to think about VR and understanding the nuances of it and educating yourselves with the differences. Where AR is bringing this interactive level and engaging in the world we're in. I love the kind of real-time data capture we did here with the survey, in finding that almost everybody here raised their hands. In fact, I think that last person who didn't raise their hand raised it late. So I think we were 100% here that everybody has used Google Maps or some technology like that. AR is already integrated into our lives. And what we're going to see with now the major tech industry adoption that's come in with Apple now allowing developers to play around with ARKit and other people within the industry now who are already entering it, we're going to see that in our futures. We're all going to see a map overlay over the road as we're driving with an arrow on the road telling us where to turn. Or we're going to have glasses that will have added capability. I mean, these already exist, and we're just going to see that more and more each year as we go through. I think the three main buckets that VR specifically is really allowing a lot of brands and a lot of companies to either share or tell their story. The three main buckets are really, for the purpose of their brand, VR just makes sense. I always love using the IKEA example that, you could look at your living room or look at a specific space and just overlay a sofa or a bed and see what it would, be within that space. IKEA is not a technology company, and IKEA is not necessarily a center point for VR, but yet they're utilizing the technology in a way that really makes sense for their brand. They're allowing that the user or their audience or their customer to really enter that space. The next space is, I think, really for PR and impact. I think we've seen a lot of players who, again, not in the technology space, do really cool things. And it catches our attention. It has that wow factor, and I think that that's definitely something to consider of utilizing it as part of perhaps maybe your whole marketing package, and where you might be thinking about where having that impact could help drive customers more top of funnel into the path you're trying to take them on. And then lastly is performance. And I think this is where most people have probably been skeptical over the last couple of years, but I think this year we're seeing a lot of progression specifically because of the situation. The tech industry has really shown us, how far VR could go over the last few years, but I think there's a lot of specific, exciting things happening this year, like Microsoft officially entering the market. And if you already go to the Microsoft store today, you can see they've got a number of headsets that are going to be coming out available at a lower price point. You're seeing Oculus yesterday announcing new product and new price points that are going to make it much more accessible to the industry. Google recently, again, is now in their second generation with their Daydream View headset and with their new line of Pixel phones that are going to be coming out. So you're now seeing the non-VR players entering and making a statement and really investing into this technology. And I think that's a big push because the market is going to follow the industry, and the market being the audience and the fans that we want to be able to reach. So I think with that said, it really lets us now think about, great, who are the users that are actually going to tap into VR and be able to tell our story? There's one thing to be a fan. We're all a fan of brands. We all have those brands at home that we either wear or drive or are passionate about through whether it's professional or personal. And when we're excited about something, we want to share that story. And that's something I always get excited about. I always think of myself as a consumer first, and so it's more of a what would I do? So it's being able to utilize this platform as a way that you can really excite them and tap into their passions. I think what Oculus is doing is exciting because, as you saw within the video, like a lot of really cool games. And I think for all the gamers that are out there who've been playing on these 2D screens, they're now able to step into that world. I think step into Rift is a great line. I know they've been using it for a while, but I really think it represents kind of what the VR industry is, because you're being able to step into that space. So with that, I feel that it's very important to think about the fact that we're not necessarily seeing our parents tap into VR, but we're definitely seeing that younger millennial market. And what I've noticed by working and talking with them on a pretty much over the the last decade or so is it's kind of changed. We used to think of having more things as our currency, but I've noticed now that experiences have become the kind of modern day currency. And VR is all about experience. It's all about immersion. It's all about that visceral response that you have to something when you're within it. So Oculus, I think, is one interesting. The last point that I wanted to make before passing it on, because I know Tom and I have been having some really good conversations about where people can go with this, is I think you can also bring people to your world with VR. And 360 video is a really interesting companion to what the VR space can do, and I think it's also perhaps probably the easiest to execute from just a process standpoint or even a cost standpoint, is that VR lets you experience 360 video in such more of an immersive way where it lets brands bring the experience to you. I know one group we've been working with over the last year, NextVR, is broadcasting sports and live music and live entertainment in the VR space. So with the VR devices, you're able to sit in the front row or sit ringside and they can bring that experience to you. And I think that sets a great example to help educate people who want to step into the space to think about how you can bring yourself into that world. So that's really, I think, one of the things I would say my biggest point of advice for everyone who's curious, either practicing or entering the space, is educate yourselves and think, holistically about the purpose that VR is going to serve for you to share the story that you have to tell, because I think it's a really exciting platform. I've been excited to be working within it over the last 10 years. And I think this year in particular, it's really exciting because we're now seeing that jump over the chasm. If you know the technology adoption curve, I think we're now being able to make that final step past those early adopters and start to enter that early majority in that market that we want to be able to reach out there.
John, you bring up an important point, and that is that it's been about a year since really the platforms and the glasses and all the hype has been going to the consumers, but the actuality, there's Ready Player One coming out with Spielberg in March, which will help introduce a little bit more of what it means in your own backyard, what these capabilities are. But the interesting thing is I have Tom Flanagan is next. He's done a lot of concert and sports. In fact, ESPN is one of their largest clients. You can't really touch ESPN's promotion without touching Big Block. And he really focuses on, I love this, this was from an article where he said his strategy at Big Block LA focuses on getting people and clients to understand that sometimes we really just need to rip off the rearview mirrors, roll up our sleeves, take risks, move fast, and just make things happen, all without silos and layers of management and global offices and unnecessary processes. You know, Tom is very much about the psychology behind the story and the behaviors and altering behaviors to get them to come to our tent. And so I'm going to turn it over to you, and you could talk about maybe Memphis or whatever you've been doing lately.
First of all, I can't believe somebody saw that article. That's awesome. I'm going to put on my glasses so I look like I know what I'm talking about a little bit. This is just glass, by the way. So it's cool that you mentioned, you referred to Jeffrey Moore's book, Crossing the Chasm, because as we were watching that, I was thinking back to, I helped launch Comcast.net. That was a long time ago. How many Comcast customers are in here? And you're all angry, I'm sure. But back when we did that, it was a true crossing the chasm experience. And if you guys don't know that book, it's amazing even today. But we were just getting to that point where broadband adoption rates got to over, I think it was 50%, and that was kind of the magic number at Comcast we were waiting for. And because we knew once people had obviously better connections, they could see video, without it looking chunky and bad, like up to that point in time. Typically, it was just a horrible experience. So we were already like jumping ahead and thinking about, wow, what can we do? What can we create, for Comcast customers? And one of our first big ideas was interactive, because I do a lot of work in sports and music. It was interactive golf lessons, right? So we started shooting videos that essentially you can interact with, et cetera. But these days of VR remind me very much of those days. And if you go back even further, when we first got computers, they had files on there, and we would have documents and files, because that's, not all of us in this room, but I grew up with real files and real paper, and I put papers in files. So when I saw that on the computer, that was a behavior that I was already accustomed to. And so everything that I do really starts with that. To me, people are always the killer app, right? So I have to understand human behavior. And once I understand it, then I can start to think about how I change it. And then if I can change it, the next thing I need to do is measure it. I got to measure all this stuff, because somebody's paying for it or paying me to do this, so I need to be able to determine that it's worth the investment. And I think Christine's going to talk a little bit more about that sort of stuff. So the way I'm looking at VR right now is, I still think it's very much early adopters. I'm not as bullish yet. But as much as it's still a seed in the ground, I mean, and you just saw there, even from a creative and technology standpoint, that stuff's in its infancy, and it's already pretty damn good, right? I mean, you see these things, and it's already amazing. So I'm so excited about, where this is going to go. Once again, from a human behavior standpoint, it catches up. So if we think about human behavior today, I think I was reading that we look at our phones over 100 times a day on average. People look at their phones now. So when we think about AR, that's not a behavior I have to change that much. So AR is where I'm telling my clients to put a lot more money right now. Because it's, again, follow the behavior. Innovate around lifestyles, not products and services. So I'm spending, one of the reasons I come to these events, as we were talking about, is so I can learn from people like this on the panel, and help me inform my clients on how they should shift their investments to VR. So right now, a lot of the work we're doing is in AR, and getting our clients to again spend more money on content in that realm. So that helps. So that helps us start to cross this chasm, by just following the behaviors. From a music standpoint, it's been a difficult time in live music. I just produced a live music festival in Memphis, less than about a week from what happened in Vegas, of course. And again, we, from a human behavior standpoint, it was very understandable that what happened there was going to impact our attendance. And so even though we had already sold tens of thousands of tickets, a lot of people didn't show up, a substantial number, and understandably, and we understand why. But some of the, so some of the comments that fans had made were, they talked about VR. They were saying that, well, gee, in the future, you know, VR can help me experience this kind of festival without actually having to attend. And again, that's kind of a reflection of a sadder reflection on the society we live in, and an application for VR and music. I think it's you know, we didn't even end up filming you know, at this event because of a lot of things that we had to obviously change our focus and worry more about the people there than the content that we were creating. But again, you know, so I'm all about following the behaviors right now. And then when we think about VR and behavior, you know, just simple behavior as the device itself, right? Putting that big goofy headset on, that's a huge behavior change. And then, of course, there's the expense of doing that and all the things that have to change to help start to change behavior. And now I know as soon as, when the hardware gets better, when the hardware becomes less obtrusive, that's what I'm really going to be excited about. And from a sports standpoint, right now we're investing a lot in esports, and which is great because that audience is going to be less of a behavior change because they are early adopters, and of course they love gaming and they love technology, et cetera. So that's where we're going to be doing a lot of our early work in VR, is in the esports community. And so I'd love to hear from anybody on the panel that has esports experience, because I'm fascinated by it now. It's kind of sort of a sleeping giant. It's just amazing. And I was at the Barclays Center, I guess about less than a month ago, for my first live esports tournament, and I'll be one at Denver, I think, next week. So we're looking at, again, where's the behavior that we should be investing our dollars, because there's going to be more early adopters than not.
Are you doing esports and VR, or you're just going to
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to be enhancing esports experiences by bringing in other lifestyle elements to esports, both live and filmed, and of course filming it all as well. So that's something we should all be, I think, thinking about. Any marketers in the room, is to start to get the new esports.
You know, Tom, I was thinking about this because, you know, millennials are now becoming parents, and the digital natives, the ones that have been coming up that are now in junior high or whatever, are going to even be more adaptable to all of these technologies because they've been born with it, basically. And esports, I think, is something that is a growth opportunity. And it's interesting because Julie Schumacher, who is the next speaker, is from the mobile gaming space, and you probably have had some experience with esports, or I don't know if you've been able to address that, but she comes from Zynga. She was actually one of the top 25 executives to watch in digital entertainment, according to Digital Media Wire, and she has a tremendous amount of experience. She's got some very interesting perspectives. She's now with Unity Technologies, who I believe just made an exclusive deal with mobile gaming with Zynga. And Julie, I'm going to let you go ahead and just take the mic here.
So first of all, please, let's make this interactive.
Yes, speak up.
I think I'm going to tackle it, which should invoke some conversation here from two paths. The first is just for context. Unity sits in a really interesting space in the sense that we don't build AR and VR, we enable it. We're a development platform, and 90% of all AR in the world is built on Unity, and about 2/3 of all VR is built on Unity. And so what we get to do is sit in this beautiful, interesting place to put tools in the hands of creators, which includes marketers, and watch them build great experiences, consumer experiences, business experiences. So I'm going to dive kind of in two paths. The first is just how we're thinking about this market from a brand and advertiser perspective. And certainly Guy and Christine will have a lot of interesting things to weigh in here. When we think about VR, there's a couple of things we think about for brands. First is that the single defining difference of all these other mediums is that in VR, you are actually literally bringing the consumer into your brand. And I want to I'm going to dive deeper onto that path and what we believe it means in the classic marketing equation of hub and spoke. So, you know, John talked about the extensions, which I kind of think of esports as an extension. It's just a fan behavior. We've seen this for hundreds of years. People love to be fans of content and consume it, which is a spoke, right? The actual content itself is generally the hub. And in VR, when we think about really leveraging that, let's just take a great example like a horror film, the recent upcoming launch of Jigsaw from Lionsgate. So they used VR as a mechanism to create a consumer experience where the consumer actually got to be in the show, if you will, play the show. And that was experiential, that was classic experiential marketing, right? Which generally is high immersion, low scale. So for example, it was demonstrated at Comic-Con. User can go in to these experiences, which we all know VR is still in the gap of disappointment, where we don't have mass reach of devices. And then you take, why is this beautiful and immersive program worth doing, is because unlike most experiential marketing, when it's a hub program in VR, it is easily ported to spoke. So what do I mean by that? So you could go into this virtual room, Jigsaw virtual room, and pour a 360 video and run it with Christine on immersive and reach millions of devices. You can basically take a classic mobile AR, which we're less than 12 months away from 94% of all iOS devices in this country are going to be AR enabled. Tens of millions of consumers, and have interactivity in the user's room. So the point being is we really think about VR is bring the consumer into your experience, build great experiences, and it's really addressable to all audiences, because if you don't own an Oculus handset, you can't spend $3,000 on a high-end PC, you still can experience this in these micro, and scale. So we like to call kind of the VR opportunity is immersion, and unlike the history of immersion, it's at scale. And the flip side is Unity works with AR developers. That is just this is the one thing that hasn't been seen before. So while yes, we've been doing Google Maps, it's not AR the way we're going to experience it, right? AR, real AR is, let's take the exact same scenario, Lionsgate, and you're in, so instead of the user being in the film, you're bringing the film into the user's world. And your living room becomes the jigsaw puzzle, or Stranger Things from Netflix. I shouldn't use entertainment because we always think we're in LA, we always overuse entertainment examples, but they are the most fun. So you just think about how different is this. This is like day and date. You're going to have hundreds of millions of devices available. So we have never, ever had a medium that did not require behavior change. Because behavior change usually requires devices, right? So if you didn't have a newspaper before, you had to get in the habit of going to the newsstand hundreds of years ago. If you didn't have a television, you had to go and actually decide to get this big box in your living room. Completely, not only a behavior change, but a consumption change. Now we already have all of these users with this device in their pocket, and because of that alone, we are convinced at Unity, as we watch developers of AR content, we watch often the same developers of VR content, is that that is going to be the tipping point that VR needed, right? Having hundreds of millions of people fall in love with that kind of immersion will make them more likely to go deeper into the VR experience and maybe commit to devices even before they're lower price points and more readily available. So those are just a couple of our thoughts, but I just want to tee up, since I kind of talked about it as hub and spoke. I just thought, we're going to jump one question. I'm going to ask Christine a question, and then we can jump to, I wrote your
Danilo.
name.
Danilo.
Look, I even spelled Danila.
No.
So Christine, so when you guys think about 360 video, are you thinking about partnering with the actual VR content creator and going out from there, or are you taking standalone 360 content from somewhere else and going in?
Good. And Christine, before you answer that question, Christine works in the distribution and media side of this space, and so she's kind of the go-to for all of us here in a lot of ways, so I just want to put you into context of the question.
Yeah, it's an interesting question because it actually shows that the industry really hasn't been developed yet, right? Because in some cases, the content could come from a brand or an advertiser, and in some cases, it comes from the developer. So the honest answer is, I don't know. It depends on the case, and it depends on the content and the goals. But it also kind of just manifests that there is no standard still. It's evolving. There's definitely, I would say, ad agencies that are now kind of VR focused, or they have like a frontier tech group where that's where their focus is and that's where it comes from. But it's still, I would say, pretty scattered today.
But in general, with all of these different platforms, I mean, content is king and context is queen, and they must be married together. It's not, none of you would say AR is the only thing, VR is the only thing, 360 is the only thing. It's all in what content is going to best answer the why of that somebody would want to use it, and then play it out and spread it out and distribute it accordingly in the right context. So thank you, Julie, very much. I thought it would be nice now to go to Danilo Mora. Did I say that
I think
right?
just to segue with the AR and VR, let's jump to the third slide on my presentation.
Okay.
Because I have an interesting case where I could only find a sponsor when I show the AR first. So it's a very interesting way to say that people say it's VR versus AR. It's like, no, actually, brands, they want reach. So the moment that, I think it's the one that we have a guy looking at an image. We just go a little bit more.
I'm getting, yep, hold on, one more.
Yeah, keep going, keep going. We're going to
Go to
skip
number
all
3?
of that. Yeah.
That one.
We're going to go to Basaldrin later. Let's just pass this one. Just keep going.
Okay, you want me to go to the next one? I'm sorry.
The next slide.
It's going. Oh, you want to see the video?
No. Let's
keep
pass
going.
all of that. I just want to
Okay.
go to the AR and VR first, then we can go
Okay.
back, just so we can keep on
Just tell
this
me where to
discussion
stop.
about AR. This one.
Okay, the museum.
So this is the museum that I did. I spent like 2 weeks in Brazil building it. I went there full ready to do like live 360 broadcast. I had all the equipment, and when I started talking to the brands that would ended up like sponsoring, they came out and they saw this museum where you actually walk around the space, and everything that is in the walls has a story and kind of like explains what you're listening to. I also made a museum that talks about all the NASA missions, Apollo 1, 12, 13, all of that. And I used the same framework to explain one of the biggest religious events in Brazil. And I did that just as a teaser. I only had like 2-3 rooms. And then you can see here, the 2 images on the bottom right, there's like an image of Mary that 2.3 million people try to get close to it. And then I did that on a photogrammetry. So I basically scanned the object and I put it in VR. And then people were asking the questions. They saw like the whole setup in the room just to do a demo, right? So wearing the headset. I said, but how many people would actually have something like that? And how would they reach it? We're like, well, just give me your phone number. I text him a link to the AR portion where he could just like spin it and see all of details of that image that is very precious for anyone of the Catholic religion in that part of Brazil. They were like, so wait a minute, how that works? So it's like any little piece of the museum you can see individually in your phone. If your phone is one of the latest generations, you can actually put that object right here in the room, and then you use your phone to walk around and see all the details. I haven't had to explain anything after that. The brands were just completely sold. And there's very interesting things about, like which brands will actually sponsor a project. Like, so when as a creator, when we build up an idea, something that we're really passionate about building it, we feel like, okay, that tech company will go crazy for it because their headset is the best one, and we just like make a whole plan thinking about it. But when you see some of the sponsors from the pieces that I had a pleasure to work with, for example, the Buzz Aldrin piece had a sponsor that was Soylent and partnered with like Time Inc. Time makes a lot of sense, but Soylent at the beginning was like, well, that's kind of interesting. The sponsors for those museums, it was a tech company, but also a lab.
Do you want me to show the Buzz?
Yes, let's show the Buzz.
Okay.
Buzz is an amazing project that we spent 8 years working with 8i, Time Inc., Fuse Effects, and a bunch of other companies.
Get it on full screen.
Virtual reality just gives a sense of participating, of being right.
You see?
Okay.
And just one other point is the NASA Apollo Museum, which should be the next slide.
Yeah, keep talking, I'll get it, because I had to close it. It started running, remember, a
I
minute ago. So
see.
keep going, and I'll pull it up.
Yeah, so one of the things that I feel like makes a lot of sense nowadays is to, it's to show the brands the reach. So you can't ignore social media, right? For example, one of the videos that we made for Círio de Nazaré in Brazil got like 200,000 views on Facebook. And that's not the number that we have on the app, of course, right? So the fact that a lot of people saw it, that they could easily share. And I think what Facebook is doing with the Oculus platform and Facebook and making it very easy for anyone that wants to see it in VR to just from their Facebook app, say, watch it in VR and launch directly into the video. Those are the things that brands are looking for. Many cases, people feel like, oh, but there's not a lot of headsets out there. Yes, but people are actually watching the content, and even if it's not an immersive yet, the moment that we have like the Santa Cruz and the Oculus Go, those devices that would be around like $200, the standalone, you don't have to worry about the battery, you don't have to worry about how much space you have left on your phone to actually download the video. A lot of those things, we're just gonna make it easier, and I strongly believe that right now, AR needs a PC connected, all the wires and all of those things, but those things will go away.
Is this the right one, by the way?
No, it's
Okay. It's the
NASA
other one? Is it the other one? Sorry. Keep going, because I want to keep going.
I think it's on the PDF.
All right. Oh, it's on the PDF.
It's near the
Okay.
Buzz Aldrin one.
So what's your business model?
We are service providers, so some companies come to us with a request for proposal,
Okay,
right?
so you make these for them.
I make this for them. For example, on the Buzz Aldrin piece, they already had the script, and they had shot already a piece with Buzz Aldrin, but they needed us to create the moon, Mars, and all of the illustrations of, making sure that people understand how the whole piece works. So we ended up building all of that. On the NASA Apollo Museum, we actually I was very passionate about this, and we started like building up the presentation, and we started looking for someone to sponsor it. And we were lucky to get like Linden Labs, the guys who created like Second Life. They have a new platform called Sensor. And actually my team started by promoting Sony Pictures movies on PlayStation. So we have this interesting background of understanding how to promote something for a gaming audience. And we worked with brands like Men in Black, Ghostbusters, anything that was like gaming or focus on the gamers demographic. So we're always doing that jump. And when we started looking into VR, we say, okay, what is the real benefit, right? What is that people actually wanted? I don't think you can force someone to like something, right? I think the moment that you have a perfect match, like in the case of the museum, when people saw that they could learn about anything that they want, people start thinking, okay, this could be the future of education. I know there's not a lot of people that have access to this device, but they believe that this will be accessible in the future. So I interviewed actually some of the brands that sponsor us. Like, why a lab decided to sponsor a project in VR in the north of Brazil, like near Amazon? And they were like, I know that a lot of people don't know what we have in here, and I feel like what's going on with the world, with the things that happen in Vegas and some things that actually happen in Brazil as well, that like they felt like they wanted people to believe there's good people around here, that they have some faith that things are not just money, money, money. That's what everybody wants. There's a lot of people that when they see a good action, they see something good, they will actually act as a good person. So that's what's the motivation on their side.
I think to your point that there's a lot of problems with getting access to the globe, that distribution and the spokes and the hub, and I think that's actually a good transition to go to Christine, who can talk about no matter what, whether you're in Brazil or Africa or anywhere, it doesn't matter. People go, well, what's in it for me? How am I going to get a return on my investment? How can you show me proof of performance? It's all nice to be philanthropic and everything, but what does it mean to my business? And I think that distribution is really key. Once you figure out the content, it's like, well, how do you contextually get it out there to get the most impact and reach those millions of people so you can prove to companies that it's a valuable business model. So let's flip over to Christine, who I think I've already introduced a little bit. I'll let you go ahead and get started. Do you want me to pull up your slides for you?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christine Lee, and I'm with Immersive. I think it's already been introduced, but Immersive is a VR and 360 ad platform. So just for some context on this, so I'm also curious, who here in this room is a VR content creator or is thinking about creating content? Okay, cool, perfect. So this is the target audience. So knowing that there's 5 of you, thank you, who's creating content, the question is then, how do you distribute that content, right? How do you actually get users to look at that? So I would say there's probably about 4 main buckets today. One is simple, it's working with the app stores and it's getting featured so that way you get kind of free foot traffic. I would say second is partnering with a distribution platform, so working with a Jaunt or a Little Star or a YouTube or whoever to get your content, especially if it's a 360 video that you want distributed. I would say third is PR. There's definitely a lot of press-worthy content that's out there that a lot of people here have already done. And then the fourth is advertising and buying ads and actually getting users there. So I'm going to dial in specifically in that fourth bucket. So today we'll talk about a case study that we did with OMD and Mountain Dew. Basically, Mountain Dew did a very cool experience called the Professor Presents, which is a game where you're basically, and I don't play basketball, so I feel funny talking like this, but where you handle the ball. So you are actually mimicking the professor who's teaching you how to like dribble the ball and do all kinds of things that's in virtual reality. So very, very cool experience. But once they've created that, then their question was, how do we get users there and how do we get relevant users there? So they came to us and we put together a plan where we basically ran their 360 video across our network. So we're reaching users that are in headset, that are already playing games, playing sport games, playing basketball games, baseball games, and then getting them to check out their content and effectively then download that content or at least learn more. So the best thing here is that the performance performance in virtual reality is really strong. Some metrics here that you'll see is that the video completion rate for this campaign was 63%, and the click-through rate, or the gaze-through rate, because there's no clicks in headset, is about 22%. So just to put that into perspective, for the view-through rate, I mean, a lot of us have looked at ads before, especially Julie, but the video view-through rate of mobile, desktop is usually sub 30%. It's just not this high. So we're seeing 63 for them, and then the click-through rate, that's where this completely blows us away and blew the client away as well. In mobile, we're usually seeing about a 1% click-through rate, and on desktop, it's usually sub 0.5%. So we're seeing 22%, and this is, I mean, this campaign did well, but it's not a huge outlier. Across the network, we're seeing 5, 10, 15% click-through rates that are in virtual reality. So once we get to the next slide, we could actually take a look at the video ad, or actually I think it's in the browser.
It says it's trying to connect to. Let's see if it does it.
In headset, just because it is very hard to actually target users that are in headset, given the number of headsets that are out there as well.
Yeah, I mean, not only is the fact that the 94% in the next 12 months, Julie said, we're going to have AR available. The younger generation, this digital native, when they're shopping, 40%, according to a recent study, 40% of them are using their phone while they're shopping. By 2020, according to Ericsson, 90% of the planet will have a mobile phone. And once you get this AR interactivity, brands like Mountain Dew or whatever, where you can go and actually, like, you're waiting in line and you're bored, because we all do it, right? We all do it now. 5 years ago, you didn't say, what do you mean we don't have Wi-Fi? You look at it and you're doing something, and all of a sudden you're interacting, and then you get loyal to that brand because you've been entertained or you've been informed. It's answered your why. So I think that AR is another good example of 360 and AR, and how that sort of opens the door for that virtual reality experience that people are afraid of accessing. Are you good? So that moves us to promotion. So you make all this product, it's all good, yay, woohoo. And then, Guy brings a real user-generated experience, a promotional experience to this process from Sidekick VR, and I'm going to let you go ahead, and I want to make sure you get your due desserts in terms of time. So why don't you go ahead, Guy, and give us a glimpse.
Thanks. So hi everyone. I really want to build on top of what our esteemed panel here was talking about. Everybody was talking about the technicalities, the reach, so how many people are using VR. At the core, when we're looking at immersive media, both at Sidekick and any other company I'm working with, there's one word that keeps, continuing to come up again and again, and it's memory. So, and the reason we are so bullish about immersive media is that it's the best media to have people memorize who you are, what your brand is, what your values are. It's better than any other framed media that we've seen before. Christine just talked about the numbers, you know, X3, X4 from any other medias, if not way more. People associate VR, associate AR with sort of a reality and the way that it plays on our minds. And we know that when we're playing games in VR, when we are trained in VR, we see a lot of training apps, we see a lot of safety and sales training apps. When we are selling something in VR, people remember that. And this is, you know, takes us back to marketing 101, right? That's the reason we're telling those stories, right? That's the reason we have that emotional music there. The visuals are moving our emotions, but the emotions are there because they need to keep people, you know, remembering who you are and what you are about. And this is why we are putting so much effort around VR as a screen, as a fourth, fifth, sixth screen. I don't know how many screens we have now. And because it is actually so effective. It is effective for entertainment, it is effective for training, and it's super effective for any type of marketing and sales perspective that we're now doing. Now, that type of memory is not only great for big brands, it's great on a personal level as well. When we are taking 360 pictures, when we're taking 360 videos ourselves, and there are now, I don't know how many cameras that are at the $200 to $300 range, so they're pretty accessible. We're actually capturing a memory better than any type of cameras, any type of other capture before. Those type of memories, those type of, you know, time fragments that we're able to capture stay with us better through VR, better than any type of other medias than before, better than usual pictures than we've done before. And this is why, sort of taking a step forward in that, we're so interested about user-generated content. How people can take their own cameras, can take all the digital assets that they have and keep that in the form of VR and AR, and how brands can actually also sort of build on top of that. So from my perspective, I know a lot of people here are you know, putting their eyes on how many VR headsets are out there and what is the new form factor. That's super important. You know, we're working with Qualcomm on all the crazy new form factor, you know, as you said, Cynthia, this is not going away. Both Qualcomm, Intel, on top of that, look at what Microsoft and other big brands are doing. You know, that type of experience, immersive experience, is not going away. How consumers, we as consumers, but also how brands, we are as marketeers, can take advantage of all those memories that are being captured, all the digital assets we already have or are creating, and move that into a media that gives us the best memory than any other media before. How can we take everything that we're already doing, whether it's for TV or for a website, and leverage that into those new type of campaigns? One of the answers is basically look at VR, almost simplified like a web page. How can we create sort of a WordPress of VR? And one of the companies I'm super involved with, called Beyond VR, does exactly that. We're taking a lot of those assets, whether it's 3D assets, 360 assets, 2D assets, loading them up on a WordPress web page, interface, and quickly create those type of experiences. Those experiences then later go as marketing promotion, very effective. We've seen numbers, again, just like the ads, super effective in terms of having people memorize the brand, understand what the brand values are, and have that memory stay with them, experience that memory all the way Jimmy TV ads promotion, and that's for the LA side. But also, if you take that, we've seen a lot of brands actually using that for other purposes. And, I mentioned training, I mentioned simulation, I mentioned sales. And I
Healthcare.
believe that when you take this into the real world with AR, you're just, there's no limit to the type of new experiences you can get.
I'm fascinated by this sort of personal museum. Like you take your own personal little museum that you can create for yourself and then take that and translate it out to the world because people like to share their stories. We're tribal, right?
Yeah, one of the things.
It used to be I saw the headline, but I didn't read the story, and now it's I saw the picture, but I didn't read the headline. So that's what we're all facing, and now you want to get them involved. So let's go to Q&A. Please do. Let's go.
First question is, what are, I guess, some of the top brands that are advertising or using VR for advertising? I've got some examples, but like, are car companies doing it?
So the question is,
That entertainment companies doing it. And the second question is, what are the other formats of advertising? Most of the VR things we've seen here and in general are companies going here, companies saying, you make this custom thing, it takes a lot of time. Are we going to have a VR ad network? Have this like pay for like a title car or a title VR supporting car in front of someone else's VR thing? At that stage yet? Or that?
I'll hit the first question.
Can you repeat the question? So, okay.
I'll hit the first question, which was what brands are taking advantage of it. So from the developer perspective, you would be surprised on what brands aren't. It's really that equation. So as far as developing immersive VR experiences, everyone from car companies, Audi is prototyping in VR. They're building experiential brochures in VR all the way through. So this will hit the second question, then I want to hand it to Christine back on the ad network side. They're building everything from brochureware to live dealerships, healthcare companies, talking about the flow of how users get through paperwork. I mean, it's really all happening, and I'm pretty sure every brand on your body right now is building VR. So there isn't a brand direct. Now, that doesn't mean the ad agencies are doing a lot of VR or scalable standard ads, and I think Christine has some great ideas on this. The second part of the question, though, which is really how how can you do this like in a modular way, right? So in VR, Christine's the expert at 360 video. The IAB, Interactive Advertising Bureau, has a standard pool, including 360 video. One of the standards they call is virtual room, which is a physical environment that is contained and 100% owned and built for the brand. But it is like an ad format. It is distributed in any VR app that wants to take advertising. So it's becoming an interesting monetization mechanism for developers of VR. I'm going to jump back to Christine.
Yeah, so just to also address the kind of what form does like a VR ad come in, like that's where it's super interesting and super creative because it's as simple as somebody creating a 15-second 360 video trailer and as complex as like the auto example, like Cadillac, for example, has like this project where they have like a virtual experience that's there at the catwalk that's in New York, but then they also are doing things like in the actual stores. They have VR headsets that people could actually take home and experience their potential Cadillac. So things that are as immersive as that and as simple as like a 360 video trailer, and something in between like what Ford did with their VR app. So something like having an iPhone or an Android VR app where you can experience 360 interactive content there. So there's definitely a large range of what we see advertisers doing and kind of, or brands doing across the board. And then to answer the question
we have 30 seconds, and somebody's been waiting patiently for one more question. And you can follow up with them up here. The panelists will stay behind if you guys have some more questions. Go ahead. This is
for Tom. Glad somebody's looking at the behavioral side of the role on that. When you look at the VR esports, is that being done with a live audience? It is.
the question is esports being done with a live audience? Oh, is VR doing?
That's where we're going.
And so if you look at, our brains sort of hardwired for defensive space, so I'm hesitant to block my field of view right now. I can see you guys here, okay? I'm not so sure about these guys behind me. And so how are you going to look at that? Because I think it's going to affect performance.
That's right. So the first step, I guess the mic's off, but the first step is we're going to be creating. We want people to understand what it's like to attend an esports event. So that's the POV that we want to start with. So that's where it all starts. Is really just bringing that experience into to people that have never been there. That will get them to want to experience it live.
Well,
But I
listen,
understand what you're saying.
we have the hour goes quickly. There's so much more. There's always so much more. I thank you so much for coming. This has been a great panel. Thank you, panelists, for all your expertise and sharing it with. And feel free, they'll stay back a little bit if you'd like to ask any questions or talk a little bit further. And thank you again, and good luck. We'll see you in the movies, right?